What's the meaning of life? I was asked this today, and it's a really good question. Actually, the guy who asked me this was a young man, and I think it's really cool that he was already thinking about this because the answer to the question, "What's the meaning of life?" is probably going to shape the rest of his life. I know it shapes the fates of nations. And there are plenty of answers coming around. Uh, and we'll start off with a couple of them. What's the meaning of life? The kind of quote that got thrown my way was kind of flippant. Wasn't trying to be mean, but it was get laid, get paid, Gatorade, and that definitely reflects a philosophy of what life's about. And that philosophy is that life is about wealth and life is about pleasure. So I've got a whiteboard because I'm getting old and soft in the squash, and it'll help me remember. So life is about wealth and pleasure. So what does this mean? Um, that seems great. Like we would all like to be wealthy and we like to feel good, right? None of us wake up in the morning and beat ourselves with whips because of the fun of it. The people who did that in the past, they were actually trying to do something. They were trying to make themselves suffer enough that the Black Plague would go away. It didn't work for them either. And that's a possible answer. But if the meaning of life is wealth, and how much money do you have? And how much money is enough? You can chase and chase and chase. There's a great quote from the Game of Thrones by one of the richer characters, a guy named John Littlefinger, where he talks about that the climb is everything, chasing a higher and higher amount of wealth and power and money as all there is. And there are definitely people who spend their whole lives getting this immense amount of financial success, and then they turn around and find out that they've got no one to share it with. I can't tell you how many stories there are that they turn around and at the very end, they've got their own company and they've got their own company, they've got their own wealth, they can afford whatever really they effectively want in life, um, and but without someone to share it with, without something to do with it, they find it is pretty empty. So wealth, in and of itself, can't be the meaning of life. And what if you're somebody who isn't wealthy? What if you are a kid and you aren't old enough to earn any money or earn any money doing anything legal? Does that mean your life has no meaning? Does that mean your life is without meaning? Or what if you are poor? Does it matter then if the meaning of life is about having wealth? Then somebody who doesn't have any wealth, their life doesn't really have any meaning. So what does it matter if they live or die or however you treat the poor? Because it's all about wealth. I think you can tell that it doesn't really fit. Well, what about pleasure? Remember the get laid, get paid, Gatorade. And sex is probably the most universal pleasure, but there's drugs, there's alcohol, there's if you read science fiction, there's hardwiring the pleasure centers of your brain into a wall socket. Um, we like to feel good. Everybody does. And I certainly can't knock that. But all the pleasure in the world doesn't help you and doesn't help anybody else. If sex is the meaning of life, then once again, what about kids? If you're too young to be sexually active or to have sexual thoughts or feelings, do you matter? Or if you get old enough that parts start breaking down and they don't work as much, or you are, say, a celibate, or you have some kind of disability, or you make a lifestyle choice where you're not having sex, do you not matter anymore? Um, and how much is enough? I've read stories about people who have hundreds and dozens of partners in these big, uh, these immensely proliferous, prolific lifestyle where they just get around and a hold of these people and they chase it. Um, they don't typically live super long and they don't typically seem very happy because they're always chasing something new. And if you had some real satisfaction, you wouldn't necessarily need to keep chasing, right? I mean, the whole point of going on a treasure hunt is eventually finding a treasure.
Um, the film The Aviator, about this pioneering pilot, Howard Hughes, is this rich, fascinating guy. But what they don't kind of tell you is Howard Hughes had all this money, and at the end, pleasure turned into a snare. He died alone, filthy. He had basically done nothing but sit there and take heroin for years and years. His fingernails were like inches and inches long, and he was all gross. Um, Pleasure eventually goes away. You run out. There's only so much time in the world, in life, you can have sex, or there's only so much drugs you can take before either you're not there anymore, or you die, or you run out of money, or some combination of them. And then there's the risks. There's the disease, from needles and from sex, and um, there's a lot of suffering involved in chasing that. So I can't say that pleasure isn't wrong, right? But I don't think it's the meaning. So I'm gonna cross pleasure off my list. Well, we got fame. Fame is important, right? I mean, we get on YouTube and we want to have a lot of likes and we want to have a lot of subscribers. We want a lot of people to pay attention to us, and that feels very good. Maybe that's the meaning of life. But fame is fickle. Fame is fleeting. Probably for most of my life, one of the most famous people I knew is this guy named Bill Cosby. I grew up listening to, my parents would play him. His TV show was on, and now he's not famous. He's infamous. Everybody hates him. He's accused of all these terrible crimes, and he's just loathed. Everybody hates him. Fame can go away as quick as you get it. Well, probably the best example would be like Disney stars and boy bands, and the hottest singer. When in 10 years they're not around anymore, and you can barely find them. When I was in high school, there was this guy named Vanilla Ice, who my girlfriend at the time really loved, and everybody knew all the lyrics to his song. Um, and he ended up spending the rest of his life being an interior designer because the fame didn't last very long. Fame goes away, so if you're basing your life on something that can vanish in a second, I don't think that's really the meaning of life. So I'm gonna get. Which doesn't say it doesn't feel nice to feel famous, but these are good things. They are not the foundation. And finding meaning of life, that's really searching the foundation. So I got to cross fame off my list. So then we've got service. Everybody talks about Mother Teresa. Is very famous. This woman who went to India and she lived the rest of her life serving the poor, and she helped thousands of people. Or you could be Jonas Salk and discover the polio vaccine, and stop the suffering and crippling and death of millions and millions, maybe even billions of people. You could cure cancer. That came up in a conversation today, and that would be great. Or you could solve world hunger. Um, you're not really going to solve world hunger because there's enough food already in the world to feed everybody. The problem is there's evil, sinful, selfish people who want power over who gets the food. North Korea is a great example. The warlords in Africa. Africa has enough food to feed Africa. The problem is there's bad people with guns who are sitting on top of the food and saying, you have to serve me, right? But let's say you could spend the rest of your life serving the poor, and you might serve 100,000 people, and in 100 years, they're all dead. In 50 years, probably, and they probably won't even remember your name. Um, it's great, but how many of you can name the person who invented the Red Cross? The Red Cross helps millions of people, saves thousands of lives. She's still dead and gone, and she's a footnote in history. So service is another good thing, but I don't think it's the base. What about glory? We hear about these military conquerors, these kings of great nations. In history, you might hear about Alexander the Great. He died when he was about 30. He didn't last very long. Julius Caesar, stabbed to death. I mean, he conquered, completely changed the Roman Empire. For centuries, people followed after him. The Roman Empire is nowhere to be seen. He got stabbed to death before he was even old. And then all of his friends spent the rest of their lives killing each other over his power. So all of the glory of one of the most famous conquerors in the world. Same thing with Genghis Khan, Attila the Hun. These people swept across continents. Everyone feared them. If I'm remembering which one was which, Attila the Hun
was poisoned to death by his own wife. He was this undefeated warrior, and then a chick took him down with some tainted tea. Um, Patton was this great conqueror, died in a car wreck. All the glory in the world just didn't pass. Didn't follow him. Well, what about wisdom? What about getting, multiple degrees and learning all the secrets of the heavens? I was talking today with somebody who was really interested in space. And hey, I get it. Until I was 10 or 11, I asked for science encyclopedias at college. I mean, for my birthday presents. Honestly, it's not a joke. I had an uncle come drunk to one of my birthday parties and complain about it, and that was the last time I actually asked for any more. But I love science. I've lost a whole weekend just because I ran across an interesting thing about argon radiometric dating processes. I am that nerd, but science gets overturned. Everything that was cutting edge 100 years ago has either been modified or disproven or changed. Um, all of the wisdom of the world, if you look at what was elite and how everybody thought, this goes in huge cycles. 120, 150 years ago, it was all about rationalism. And then everybody found out, well, rationalism, this idea that there's nothing but what we can see and what we can think, is very cold, and there's no love in it, and there's no compassion. This is an idea that comes around. Actually, a couple characters in Dickens, are this kind of person. Scrooge is one of these kind of people, and they find out at the end that that's kind of empty, and people on the other side, where wisdom is being all connected with nature, but just like leaves that just like grass that grows up and then falls away, or you throw it in the fire. If you live in a place where there's not a lot of wood, all of that wisdom doesn't change the fact that you go away. So wisdom is a great good thing, but it isn't the meaning of life. Because if that, among other things, look at the have-nots. Does a 5-year-old have wisdom? Does a 5-year-old have life? Does their life have meaning? Their life absolutely has meaning, even though they don't have any wisdom at all, really. And actually, most people at 25 don't have a whole lot of wisdom. Um, well, what about family? Family is a great and a good thing, and it's great to have people surrounding us. But did you know that fully, 30 to 40% of people never get married at all? They never have kids. They never go on. Have they failed at life? Um, some of the people have dedicated their lives to something else. Some people just never connected with the people they loved. And even in family, well, you probably know your father and your grandfather. Who was your ancestor 150 years ago? What was his name? Can you tell me anything about him? I mean, you came from him. Without him or her, you wouldn't even be alive. That's absolutely vital to your existence. And even with all the incredible things about family, it doesn't last. Well, what about love? I honestly think that love is the key. Um, Love is the meaning of life. And again, in case you couldn't tell from the fact that on my Bruce the Monk channel, I'm wearing monk's robes, it's kind of a hint. I'm a medieval style Christian. And I know that a lot of you aren't going to agree with me, and I know that a lot of you may not, believe where I'm coming from, but I'm going to give you the truth as I understand it. So, I want to read you where I think the meaning of life is found. And that's from Ephesians chapter 1. I'm going to read the English Standard Version. And this is verses 3 through 10. Blessed be the God and the Father of our Lord Jesus Christ, who has blessed us in Christ with every spiritual blessing in the heavenly places, even as he chose us in him before the foundation of the world, that we should be holy and blameless before him. In love, he predestined us, that means determined ahead of time, for adoption as sons through Jesus Christ, according to the purpose of his will, to the praise of his glorious grace, to which he has blessed us in the Beloved. In him we have redemption through his blood, the forgiveness of our trespasses, according to the richness of his grace, which he lavished on us in all wisdom and insight, making known to us the mystery of his will, according to his purpose. Remember, we're talking about meaning, purpose, which he set forth in Christ as a plan for the fullness of time, to unite all things in him, things in heaven and things on earth. Now, if this is right, if Ephesians is right, then there is a God, there is a being who made everything. And he chose you. And what did he choose you for? What was his mission? What was he designed? If he designed you, if you were a computer program, why did he write you? If you were an app, why did he download you into reality? And he says that the purpose was to be his son, to be his daughter. It's really simple. The foundation isn't necessarily family, although family is great, and it isn't fame, although fame is great. But the idea that there is someone who was looking forward to your very first breath before the world began, before there was light, there was a plan that you would be, that you would exist. We've all looked forward to people. Maybe if you looked forward to your first date with that beautiful person you just asked out, or if you're looking forward to, looking forward to the birth of your first kid. Nothing, those are great things, but you might look forward to that for a couple months. You might look forward to that for a couple years. This is somebody who's looked forward to this since before the dawn of written history. For you, not just kind of in general, but you specifically. And what did he predestine you? What was the plan? What was the purpose? To take you as a child, to be your father, to have him as for you to be his son or his daughter. Well, it can't be that simple, right? I mean, we have to do something. All the plan, it says right here, in verse 7, we have redemption through his blood, the forgiveness of our trespasses, because let's face it, everybody screws up. I was watching, did you know the original Hebrew word of sinning is to miss? I was watching somebody play Star Wars Battlefront today, and he was trying to snipe, and he would line up and he would miss. And he did this like 4 or 5 times in a row, and it was kind of fun. But if his meaning of life was to succeed and to get glory, he failed. And if his meaning of life, to be forgiven, to be forgiven of those trespasses, those misses, the times that we don't hit the mark, well, that was already planned, not by anything we did, but because of what Jesus has done for us, which I can talk to you about later. But the idea that the meaning of life is so simple that it is love. Let me explain a little bit more about what this plan of love might look like. Again, this is not going to take very long. So Matthew 22:36 through 40. Teacher, which is the greatest commandment in the law? And he said to them, now this is Jesus who was God talking, you shall love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your mind. This is the great and the first commandment, and the second is like it. You shall love your neighbor as yourself. On these 2 commandments depend all the law and the prophets. Now that's a way of saying everything you have to do and everything God wants for you is summed up in these 2 things. One, to love God. And is that really hard? Can you imagine is it hard to love somebody who's been looking forward to you for thousands and thousands of years? Can you imagine somebody, who wanted you to breathe, who was waiting for you to appear, has been planning on having you to love and on you loving them, that's their goal, that's the big plan? Because that's something to love and be loved. That's something that you could do as a little baby. Little babies can do that. Old men can do that. The poor can do that. The rich can do that. If you're still waiting to shave, you can still do that. If you're wishing you didn't have to shave your back, you can do that. If you've got hair coming out of your ears and you're 90 years old, you can still do that. You can do that if you're blind, lame, deaf, dumb, mute, crippled. You can still do that. One of the things that I think this is so great as a meaning of life is that it sets you free. You can have pleasure without being enslaved by this constant need to go chase it. Gotta get my next high. Man, I gotta get laid. Pass me another beer. I can't get through the day without it. Or, maybe it's shopping. Maybe it's another kind of addiction. You're free from that. That's not what it's about. And it doesn't matter if you lose 5 consecutive bets and you owe your best friend, you owe your friend 11 million imaginary dollars because you failed, because it isn't about that. It isn't about the glory, and it isn't about the money. So whether you have your friend make a bet with you and he owes you 11 million dollars, or whether you've lost 11 million dollars, can't touch this meaning, and that's a really great thing. And it is a personal thing. There's one of my favorite Bible verses. I can't remember what the name of it is. Is this commandment: cast your cares on Him because He cares for you. So this isn't just you're part of this immense list, right? Like if you see your school list or the people in your homeroom and they just call your name, it isn't like that. Because to have a command to cast your cares on God means that God is standing there. He's the kind of person who's saying, I care so much that even though I watched your whole day, I want to hear you tell me about it. I want to hear you tell me how you're feeling, even though I already know. I'm so happy to spend time with you that I'm going to listen to what you want. I'm going to listen to I want you to tell me what you're afraid of. I want you to tell me what you hope for. I want to hear it. If you have you've ever seen, if you have a little brother or little sister maybe, or cousins, you've seen a little toddler and they make this kind of really kind of rugged, you can barely tell what it is, drawing of, say, a house, and they bring it over, mommy, look, I've got a house. And you could definitely do way better than that. And houses don't quite look like that. And houses, you know houses inside and out way better than this kid. Now, why does it matter? Why is that parent going to go, that's really beautiful, and put it up and put it on magnets on the refrigerator? Is because that's the best house that's ever been designed, or that the parents couldn't do better? No, it's because who it comes from. And the meaning of life is that there is something, someone, God, who loves you so much that even if you screw up everything, even if the drawing of your life is all messed up and you've colored outside of all the lines, you're still going to end up on that fridge, not because of what you've done, but because somebody, Jesus, was perfect for you. If you have more questions about that, then feel free to ask me them. I'd love to hear your comments, and I would love to try and answer them. But the best thing about the idea of this, about this idea that to be loved by God and to love the people around you as the foundation of life, is that it's going to last forever. If you've heard John 3:16, for God so loved the world, that includes and is especially you, that He gave His only Son, that whoever believed in Him wouldn't perish but have everlasting life. The meaning of that is the plan isn't just that you're loved now, like a pet cat. Let's say you raise it from a kitten and it gets old, and by the time you're 30 or 40, the cat's dead from old age and it's gone, and there's nothing you can do. You can't have the cat anymore. That we're not God's cats to be bred and disposed. He loves you so much, and He was willing to give up everything so that He could keep on loving you, and so that you could keep telling Him how you are, so you could keep living together forever. And I think that's a meaning of life that's worth telling everybody about. And if you don't agree with me, I would love to hear why you don't agree with me. I'd love to talk to you about it, and I'd love to talk about why we don't agree. And because I think I'm right, I'd like to challenge you and try and get you to see things my way. And if you do agree with me, I hope it's a good reminder that it isn't about what you've done or what you can do or how much money or family or children you're going to have, but it's just about the fact that you're loved, and that's the meaning of life. And when you have that coming down like the Death Star beam, it tends to explode outward, and you'll do weird things like spend a couple hours trying to just be around and be encouraging for random strangers, or you have people like Mother Teresa who will go and feed the poor. And you can show other people a kind of love that builds a great family. And you can be the kind of husband or wife that gives you all the pleasures of sex life for a long time after you're married. Or you can be the kind of person who, because God has given you the work, you do all of it, you do your best at it, and that gives you fame, or that gives you money, or that provides for you. It may not. There are people who followed this and they got eaten by lions, but the lions couldn't end them. And that's the point, that this love, first down to us and then out for everybody else, is something that can make us immortal. And isn't that something that everybody wants? You look at the Star Wars universe, in the Star Wars mythology, Darth Sidious was searching for immortality, and Anakin Skywalker had these visions of Padme dying, and he needed her to live, so he joined. That was the key moment that made him go over to the dark side. Was that Sidious promised that he could conquer death, and in reality, it was Qui-Gon loving and caring about people with the living force that did find force immortality. But that even then was a work. What if you're one of the people who didn't get the special wisdom? What if you weren't a Jedi and then you couldn't be immortal? What if you weren't enlightened enough and then you couldn't be immortal? There's all this insecurity, even though they want the right thing. And the good news is, if it isn't something you've done, but it's something that somebody who came down to earth and was perfect when you couldn't be, and then somebody who was infinite and paid all the prices for all the ways that you screwed up and all the ways that I've screwed up, so that it isn't about what we've done, but because of Jesus died for us when we deserved to die, and because he rose and defeated death, if we're with him, we get to play follow the leader and live forever, where we'll be loved forever, where we will be able to love others even better than we love them now. And that's a way that the fundamental meaning of life will last forever. You can have it. I'd love to tell you about it if you'd like to know more. But that's my thoughts. Thanks for your time.